Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Now, during the inauguration of our 7th president, Her Excellency cited the Panyard Model as a vehicle for youth and community development. Now, we couldn't leave that just so without having a conversation about it. So we're very happy. We're privileged to be speaking with Assistant Professor of Music at UTT, Dr. Gormandy-Benjamin, and we're looking at the Panyard Model as a vehicle for development. Dr. Gormandy-Benjamin, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
And there are a few people that I really wanted to speak with, and you are one of them, seeing that you actually started playing pan at about 5. So with regard to that, though, we want to start off on, not necessarily anecdotally, but on your experience, thank you. Your personal experience and how that helps you define the Panyard Model, please.
Yes, as you mentioned, I started playing at age 5, and my early experience as a panist included academies, being in music school, not just having music classes at my primary school, which was Newton Girls RC, but I was also on the Auburn Wilshire's music school, and I moved on to Dr. Mula Albino Di Cotto. But my Panyard experience pretty much started when I was 9 years old. And that time, in Trinidad All-Stars, Steel Orchestra, there was no junior band, no youth orchestra. I was a child among many adults. My parents thought it would be important for my development to join a steel band and associate myself with a community of other panists. And I think that was one of the best decisions they've made for me, because the experience and the education that you get in a Panyard is very different to one that you would get in a more formal education setting. So when you're in classes, you're learning music theory, you're sort of learning music literacy, learning how to execute specific pieces towards an exam to get certified. Whereas the Panyard adds a community element where that is sort of, that experience assists you with learning music by rote and seeing how other people learn music. And that concept of learning music by rote, in addition to music literacy, really helped my development and helped propel the education that I received in music and in pan. And not just having that element of the music, but the community is also very important, understanding how roles exist, understanding, you've seen an arranger that's putting music together, and the music is coming together within an orchestra, and not just panorama style, but there's also classical music and popular tunes. So the experience for me as a young panist in the Panyard was something I could not have gotten, in the music academies and in school. So I think having my parents having exposed me to the different educational styles really helps my development as a young panist.
Do you think they complement each other more than one taking away from the other? And this is learning by rote, being able to play by ear, versus that structured, everything is scored. Because I've heard conversations both ways. So what is your take on that?
Oh, they absolutely complement each other. I do think that musicians need to be able to do both. They sort of work hand in hand together. The music literacy part is very important in understanding the music, and sort of help you as well to create music, because now you have a different way in which you understand it, and it also assists with learning music much easier. So for example, in a formal setting, you would learn scales, right? All right, your major scales, your minor scales, you have all these different types of scales: chromatic, whole tone, pentatonic. And these are all different patterns that you would learn on the pan. So then when it's time to do rote learning, and you're understanding, okay, I'm going to teach you this, and somebody would look at me and say, oh, how do you get that so fast? I'm like, because it's a major scale. So it definitely complements each other, because you're able to now analyze the music that you're being taught. right? And it's like, okay, it's a chromatic scale that goes into a major scale that then has a pattern of a pentatonic. And you're able to do that because of the formal training of the theory. And some people are just amazed when they see others sort of learning music very quickly. And I think part of that is because of that formal music theory training that assists with that process. So I think they definitely go hand in hand. And also, if you're only reading and you only have the music theory elements, I also think you absolutely need the rote learning process and the community process. They go hand in hand, and I think both are very, very, very important.
I like the fact that you rounded off that answer talking about the community process, because you've spoken about Newtown Girls, you've spoken about being 9 years old in the company of adults and All Stars. I looked at the smile you said when you just mentioned the name of the group, but also your academic work makes me want to ask the question, what is a steel pan community?
Oh man, that is a very deep question, because there's so many. A steel pan community is made up of so many different things, and it's sort of underrepresented and spoken about in a way that it needs to be considered even more significant than it is. Because when you're a part of a community, I mean, and we're not just talking about the basic things like, okay, you're among other people who have the same interests that you have, sure, but you're also in a massive network. So, for example, Trinidad All-Star Steel Orchestra, and I'm sure this is true for some of the other bands, Renegades, Phase 2, Invaders, Despas, you name it, right? Once you're part of a community, you're now part of a network. So that network then has people that come from different backgrounds. So, for example, you might know a medical doctor, you might know a lawyer, you might know somebody who is a tradesman, you might know someone who does construction, you might know. So there's a network of people that are coming into this space with different ideas and different experiences that then helps your experience and your educational sort of experience propel, because now you're mingling with people of similar interests who are looking out for you, of different age groups, and it gives you a purpose. It's also a space that I've noticed for myself and for other youths as well. It's a space of belonging as well, because sometimes when you're a youth, maybe you don't feel like you fit in at school, or maybe you do fit in, but then you have a completely different, more mature experience, within the Panyard, because now you are working with people who are twice your age. You're working with people who are the same age as your grandparents, right? So that type of mentorship, that type of networking, and I'm not even talking about the music, because I talked about that before, right? I mean, and those types of experiences that youth in particular, and even the more senior people get, that is invaluable. I mean, I've seen people around the world really be driven by that experience, and sometimes we don't even realize that what we're doing in our communities and our societies, people around the world want. They're like, what? This is what the Panyard does? We need this in our communities. We are having issues with these youths. These are having issues with that youth, and we bring the steel band, and boom, things start to get better. And we ourselves are not even seeing the significance of what the Panyard is. So I was kind of really, really happy. I think many of us who see that significance, we were really happy to see our new president sort of mention it as something that we have to look for and look at, and further developing it, because it really is something that can, once we invest in it and once we continue to see its significance, it will have many, many rewards for the development of our youths, especially here in Trinidad and Tobago.
You say that, and there's so many things that you just touched on. And so intergenerational communication, looking at mentorship, looking at the fact that there's development, looking at the fact that sometimes it feels as though we still need some validation from outside before we realize, but wait, no, these are the things that we're working with. So, and you started to touch on it as well, but there are things that people may miss because they're looking at the thing, but they're not looking at it possibly with the right lens. So what are some of those things that people may miss, but they take place very consistently in the Panyard that we can say, okay, well, this is part of the steel pan model?
Mentorship definitely is something that is significant. The ability to function in society, understanding that there are rules to follow, just sort of being a part of a forever evolving organizational structure, right? So, which can be, of course, translated to being a member of society in Trinidad and Tobago. So something as simple as you have a section leader. Okay, that section leader is in charge of your section. Once you work hard and you develop your skills and you show that you are professional, you can then build to become a section leader, and then possibly someone on management, and then possibly someone that has or maybe even the manager. So the things that we sort of miss sometimes is, one, that mentorship that a lot of youths receive, because they are working in tandem, hand in hand with people who are older, who have more experience. They're also functioning in an organizational structure, and you understand that you have a role, right? They're the players, they're the section leaders, they're the captain / managers, they're the production team. There's, and then there's a youth orchestra. And then even in the youth orchestra, the managers sometimes of the youth orchestra are the youths. The captain is a youth. So now you have this level of responsibility that encourages you to be a good citizen, to be a good person, because now there are others looking up to you. So being a member, there's so many benefits. But to me, one of the biggest of being a member of the steel band and working in the Panyard really comes from understanding how to be a good member of your organization, which then translates into how to become a good member of society. And I think that is a significant thing that happens. And we have to look at that even further to see how we can really develop that concept, and how that will definitely translate even further into understanding that this is actually what it does. One of the things.
And I'm going to let that one of the things that response marinate a little bit. We take a short break. We are speaking with Dr. Mia Gormandy-Benjamin, Assistant Professor of Music at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We'll return with more. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Dr. Mia Gormandy-Benjamin. We're looking at the Panyard model as a vehicle for development. And we did a lot of world building in the first half of the conversation, kind of building out definitions. We haven't even spoken about the possibility of a distinction between community, and you said network, and I also want to throw out ecosystem there, because looking at the different jobs, responsibilities, roles, functions that can go into an ecosystem, and this is including family that may not even play pan. But I want to hone in, even before we look at the ecosystem, I want to hone in on, you had all the resources you needed, pie in the sky business that we're working towards. What are some of those incremental steps? What are some of the factors we need to be aware of if we wanted to say, okay, well, we are going to build a Panyard with the primary aim of developing individuals and communities, and the secondary aim of producing fabulous panists? What are, and you have that blank slate. It's yours. Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking what are maybe some of the hurdles that you might have to overcome in particular?
Not even necessarily hurdles. Okay, if you were able to build a Panyard from scratch, what are some of those things that you say, okay, well, I want this, we're going to have this in place. So take me through that process.
Oh, I see. Right. So blank slate, we don't know. We're trying to build a community, right? Well, that's an excellent question. So of course, the first thing you need is pretty much a management team with a vision. That's the first thing. The reason why some of these steel orchestras are so successful at youth development and creating that structure is because they've been existing for a very long time. Two, they've had time to think about vision and what exactly the community needs. And then three, the community is also familiar with the organization, right? So Renegades has their followers, Trinidad All Stars, we have our followers in the communities. So if we're doing this from scratch, it's very important that the people who are creating it has a vision with specific outcomes and goals, right? And then those outcomes and goals sort of get spread towards the creation of the process. So of course you need PANs. Of course you need people who know what they're doing. And I was going to say educated, but not necessarily, because there's education and experience, right? So people who are experienced, in addition to having the information through education, perhaps, that can be in the leadership roles, that are also aware of what the goals are. Because sometimes not every Panyard in Trinidad and Tobago may have the thinking about these things, right? So having those things in mind and having that team that the ideas can trickle down, then you can sort of get the instruments, encourage the youths to be part of it, and you set up a structure that then contributes towards the outcomes that the management team would have created. So the vision is important. Knowing what the outcomes are is also an important element. And then, of course, having the different understanding who in the community you want to be a part of this. Youths, the working class, the senior citizens, and building that, I think, is very important. But to me, the key all the time is making sure that the vision is there and you have an efficient managerial team that can help execute, or else things would kind of, not go as well.
Yeah, well, they have different places that speak about that in terms of people perishing for lack of vision. So I take your point. But I really like the fact that you also look and try to break from this entire grouping into specific cohorts, and it's like, who is it for? Who are we trying to get? Because one of the questions that I had was, what are some of the best points along this pipeline, if you're thinking from someone who's totally a beginner to someone who is an experienced professional, being able to contribute and be a mentor for persons further along the pipeline or in the earlier aspects of the pipeline? Where do you have them coming? Is it at early? Is it young? Is it a certain type of mind frame, mindset? What are some of those things to say, okay, well, this is where we want you here, or it makes sense for you to go here? What are some of those things that come to mind when you think about something like that?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because we're literally having these conversations at Trinidad All Stars Steel Orchestra as we continue to develop our academy, because there must be a place where no matter what level you're at and no matter what age you're at, there's a point in which you can join, because as we've been saying, we see the value in community, right? So if for us, for example, at Trinidad All Stars, in developing our academy, we launched our junior academy last year in September 2022 into October, where we have ages 5 to 12 come in. And then also the discussion is, let's say I am 65 and I've never played pan before, I'm retired and I want to play pan. Where do I go? Right. So there's a further development of the academy, right, that is coming into play. And then, of course, you have the stage side. What if I'm an experienced player and I want to join All Stars? Boom, we have a stage side. And these are the elite sort of players who have lots of experience, learn music very quickly, and could go out and be the face of the band. So that conversation, that question that you're asking is something that I think many of us in the steel band will be sort of thinking about and making sure that we develop those types of ideas. So no matter who you are, where you are in life, and where you are in the trajectory of your learning ability and education, there's a spot for you, in the Panyard. And that is exactly what we are continuing to develop, because we've developed it a little bit, but we're continuing to develop it at Trinidad All Stars Steel Orchestra.
Do you think there's a way to bring a little closer the Panyard versus spaces that are a little more like tertiary education. And this is kind of jumping on to the point that you made. There are different levels and nuances to education, and looking at what is fit for purpose, what helps to achieve an objective. Sometimes that piece of paper looks very pretty, but the person not really doing anything with it. So are there ways that we can make some of those gaps a little closer? So even like the way being able to be musically literate versus being musically intelligent and being able to learn by ear, what are some of those ways that we can help make those things come a little closer together?
Well, actually, they are very close right now. So at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, where I am currently on faculty, we have a pretty large PAN studio of over 30 students. We also have a PAN fellowship program that we advertise internationally, 3 to 6 month program where musicians, established musicians who are learning or seeking PAN education and PAN history, instruments of the engine room, they come to Trinidad and immerse themselves in Panorama, get a certificate, and then they're able to go back to their countries and teach PAN in a significant way. So at UTT, we have our steel pan studio, which comprises students from all over Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the Caribbean. We have Caribbean students as well who are not from Trinidad, and many of them are in a steel band, right? So sometimes it's so connected that Panorama, many times we kind of have to take a small backseat here at UTT to accommodate things like Panorama, because we also think that that's a very important element of their education. So you would see that many of our students in our studio are now coming out, graduating and being leaders. We see that many of the Panorama arrangers this year and winners will pass students at UTT and the Academy for the Performing Arts. And that is because that relationship never stopped. And for those who are coming in who never had a relationship with a community band or steel band, they then sort of are encouraged to join a steel band, not necessarily from the UTT side, but unofficially, where we have students who are arranging and past students. They say, come and join my band, come play with us, so to support the, UTT arrangers who were here and who are here. So they then become part of communities and they then stick with those bands. Some of them are All Stars, some of them have gone Renegade, some of them are in Silver Stars, so we have that connected, that connection between the Panyard experience and here. And we've also made it now part of our curriculum because we have a Carnival immersion course right now where you can take this course. And a part of that expectation is that you have to go out into Carnival, experience it, document it, journal about it. And then we have the very important conversations here. So for us, at least here at UTT, it's very important that the two are connected, especially if you came to focus on PAN, then it's very important that you have that community experience as well.
I think that's something that's very beautiful, because many times you may just learn that one thing, like you're saying, but you're not necessarily grounded. So this is what it is, but you don't know why it is the way it is, which I think is also important. We haven't necessarily spoken about digital aspects of communities lending themselves towards development, and I'm thinking specifically about the virtual PAN initiative as well as Pannotation. But hopefully that means that this is just the setup for another conversation. But we want to thank you very, very much, Dr. Mia Gormandy-Benjamin, Assistant Professor of Music at the UTT. And this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.